Okay, so hi everyone, and thank you for joining for the to hear a bit about the Rosetta 6.1 highlights. This is Daniel Greenberg here. Whoever doesn't know me, I am the product manager of Rosetta. And 6.1 is a release which was just came out in July, and it was a non-major release, but there are certainly some major, mainly infrastructural changes. A lot of features that came through from the working groups, ideas exchange, and many initiatives that also came from our side. So today we're going to talk about, go over briefly about the highlights, do a demo on some of them, and mainly to give you an idea of how it works, so you can also approach us later and talk to us or the support about how you can implement some of these features. And then we'll talk about the roadmap, both 6.2 specifically, which is expected to come out at the end of this year, and then a bit of a broad picture of what we're going to see in 2020. Feel free to ask questions. You can send them through the chat, and I will try to respond throughout. Otherwise, I will send out emails later on, and or feel free also to just pick up the phone to me or anyone from the team. So this is again a bit of a highlight so that we're going to talk about. It's not all the features that are covered in 6.1, but certainly the main ones. So as I said, in the infrastructure, we have some pretty major changes coming through on the Solar Cloud, which we'll talk about, Java 11, and other third-party upgrades. Preservation, we added some information coming through, the request coming through from the Format Library Working Group in the Format Library Releases page. User experience, we continued our efforts in the user preferences and allowing the institutions to customize it for the specific user. And data management, we had some capabilities around the workbenches on unassigning SIPs and an expansion of some of the APIs. On the delivery side, we had quite a lot of delivery features coming through from the delivery and integrations working group around both the viewers' usability, some new out-of-the-box viewers, and also in the direction of being able to configure specifically the IE viewer, the different elements on in the viewer for your own needs and for the specific collections that you have in your institution. And then the system setup, which is again a broad effort which we have started already in 6.0 and is going through also into next year, simplifying the system setup. And providing more out-of-the-box tools and many other changes in that area. So we'll start with infrastructure. And here we introduced an upgrade from Solar to Solar Cloud. And this was a major infrastructural change which came in a way from two different directions. One is the fact that we're always striving to keep our third parties up to date with the latest versions. In this specific case, this also came from the customers or from the working group who requested to have more reliable indexing and to have redundancy in the indexing server. And this is exactly what Solar Cloud provides. And we'll just see a brief screenshot, and but I'll just show you a few words about how this can be done, what it looks like at the end of the day. So. Once you do configure the Solar Cloud, each institution will be able to define how many replicas they had of the indexing shards, which will eventually provide them a fault-tolerant cluster of the Solar servers. So I'm going to send out this presentation later on, where you can find some detailed configuration guide, which is going to be sent out. So once you do configure it, so first of all, once you install 6.1, it isn't automatic. It's completely up to your schedule when you want to configure the Solar Cloud. So you will be continuing with your previous installation of Solar, and only once you decide you want to go forward, you can then configure Solar Cloud and define how many replicas you need. So you don't really need the help of the support team. What you can specifically see here is actually a screenshot from one of the customers who's already configured it without the need for help from the support team. But of course, the team is there to help if you do have any questions. It's very straightforward. And here specifically, you can see quite a major usage of Solar Cloud, where you have 8 different shards replicated 3 times, and what you have is the Zookeeper which manages the different replicas and on which servers they reside. I'm familiar with exactly the situation of the health of the different servers, and according to that, distributes the different replicas on those servers. And perhaps we'll just take a quick look at what a Solar server, Solar admin looks like. So this is the Solar admin that you are familiar with. Just as you can see here on the left, you have the cloud section over here, which provides this graph, and you have the different, you can see exactly which servers have which replicas, and you can actually switch between them. If you just select another one, you will then be forwarded over to the 224. And here on the left also you have the core selector where you can skip between the different shards. So this is again a very intuitive. This is the UX of the admin which you are familiar with, and here you can get a very clear view of how your shards are replicated. So I encourage you really to start using this capability, because it's not a lot of work and it provides a very important functionality for the reliability of your system. So this is just a snippet out of the configuration guide, which is basically now part of all the documentation that you have for version 6.1. You can just go into the knowledge center and see it. And there's some detailed documentation on both how to set it up to start with and also to update existing configurations. And if you have questions about the sizing, if you're not sure if you have enough infrastructure for the number of replicas that you want, you can again you can turn to the installation team, to Ex Libris, and we will help you do a sort of sizing exercise to understand if you need to upgrade your infrastructure. And this is something which is, of course, for all new customers, this will be a standard process. Upgrade to Java 11. So this is the latest and greatest, and this was a major change which we started working on already in 6.0. We had more minor updates to components which were dependent on this, and so other than having an upgrade here of Java, this of course had some implications which some of you are aware of, mainly around the transition to OpenJDK, which is a general process which Ex Libris has gone through, and for all the products, which had some implications. Some of them you can see here. One of them is end of support for Solaris, and we have been in touch with the several customers who do still run on Solaris, working on migrating over to the Linux operating system. And of course, there is the end of support for the JPEG 2000 viewer, where we provided, of course, the alternative of the OpenSea Dragon, which we'll talk about, providing basically a more advanced experience at the end of the day. So the second one happens to be also a benefit. So many other additional upgrades for the third-party tools that we have in the system. Universal Viewer, we upgraded to version 202. And the XSLs, which we upgraded to use XLT2, which is just part of an ideas exchange where customers really specified exactly which XSLs they want to upgrade to version 2, which then provides them further capabilities. So data management, that's the next area where we provided some features in 6.1. One of them being unassigned SIPs. So this is really an alignment with what we have in the technical analyst workbench, where we're allowing assessors, the AAA, the assessors, approvers, arrangers, to unassigned SIPs who are assigned to another staff member. So here really the use case is if there is a specific staff member who is on leave and you would like to be able to unassign without the dependency on that person. This is a straightforward feature, but very usable one, where you can just go into the workbench, look for example, Rebecca assigned to, and then you can simply unassign one of the SIPs. And you are probably asking yourselves, well, why can't we then unassign all of the SIPs? And we are going to get to that. That is going to be coming through as a bulk action in 6.2. So that was a good question you're asking yourselves. Okay. We expanded the SIP status, the get SIP status API. This was also a request that came through as an idea exchange where there is an external application which wants to be aware of the status of the SIP, which needs to provide, which is dependent on also the number of IEs which are included under that SIP. So we are still maintaining that differentiation between the SIP status, which is still can be finished, and even though there are no IEs under that specific SIP. So the existing APIs, they provide another parameter of the number of IEs. As you can see over here at the bottom, you can see the number of IEs which is added to the API. You can see the change already in Javadoc, also up on the developers network. And this affects all three APIs, which you can see over here, which they all return the SIP status info object. So around delivery, we have seen a lot of changes. So generally, as you know, we have many embedded viewers inside the system. Each one provides some sort of speciality. We have the high resolution viewers, and we have the book reader. But the METS viewer, the general IE viewer, is the native one, where that is where we're really focusing all the customization capabilities. Of course, it's much easier for us to customize it and to allow configurations from your side, since it's our development. And we have had customers. This is a discussion that we had already back in Los Angeles, but also now in RMIT in the working group meeting, where there are many different elements which are on the screen, which institutions don't necessarily need for all their collections. So, for example, if there is a collection where there are single files per IE, then there really is no need to have the content pane, for example. But beyond that, there is also functionality which institutions would like to control, like the ones, some of them which you can see over here, mainly around the download. So we'll take a look what that would look like. So here you can see the native IE viewer. And the download now has the option, basically three options which you have now in downloading. And we'll see what this looks like. And it's independent of each other for configuration. You can have one without the other, or you can have both or none. So this would look like in the administration. And you will have the representation profile configuration. And as you can see here, you have download all and download files. So again, completely independent of each other. So you can, for example, as we saw before, we have the download single file, which is a new feature, which basically means that you can provide the ability of downloading single files independently of the format, completely agnostic to the format, or whether the browser renders it as it was beforehand. And separately, you have the download all functionality. And you may decide that, for example, you have IEs which are huge and they have hundreds of files per IE. You wouldn't like to provide the capability of downloading all. That would be way too heavy. But you do want to provide the ability of downloading a single file, so you can play around with that and make decisions based on that. And in the download all, there has been also a request to, beyond having the download all, also to have the download reflect the structure of the specific representation. The institutions wanted it to reflect the structure of the struct map of that, the structural map of that representation. So we still have the all representations which exist. That was the option which existed up to now. We now added the selected representation, which will then download specifically the struct map which is selected and displayed to the viewer. So we'll see what that looks like. So that, and if we, for example, disable the download file and save that, then refresh the viewer, we should now see we don't have the download file anymore, but we do have the download derivative copy, which is specifically the representation which is open over here and displayed to the viewer. But if we close that and open a different one, the preservation master in this specific case, then we will see the preservation master. And the download, the structure of the download will then reflect the structure of this representation. And so that is around the configurations which were added to the download functionality. And in addition, we added there was a request coming through where institutions did not want the browser to automatically render the content. So again, if this is there could be several use cases. For example, there is a textual file which doesn't look good on some of the browsers and doesn't actually reflect what the actual textual file should look like, and you prefer to just provide the capability of downloading and forcing download, basically. And then the user can open it with an external application, for example, or if, for example, it's an EPUB. And alternatively, if there is a very large file and rendering is not efficient for that file, you can also only provide the option of downloading the file and avoid the automatic rendering. So that is now available. If you can configure that through the file delivery rules of the Streamgate file viewer. So if we go back to the administration, the file delivery rules, we go to the Streamgate viewer, and in the parameters you can add here direct equals false, and all of these parameters, by the way, you can add directly in the URL. And then you can see when we refresh the viewer, then you can see that even though the browser does know how to render it, there is only an option of downloading with the thumbnail here, the size of the file, and that will then prevent automatic rendering. So that is another option which was added. Again, this can be added also directly in the URL up here and doesn't necessarily need to be in the administration. And then we have the different elements, the graphical elements of the viewer, which are now configurable. So we have the left pane of the table of contents pane, and we have the right pane of the metadata pane. Both of them are now configurable. So if we go into the output parameters of the IE delivery rules, so here we can add parameters. For example, metadata pane equals, so we have three options basically. We have none, which means that it won't be displayed at all. The end user, the patron, won't be able also to open it. And this is, again, for cases where the metadata pane doesn't add any specific information. Therefore, you don't want to just load the screen with irrelevant metadata. All right, and you can see that it isn't even, it can't be even opened. And in addition, what we can add up here, and again, you can basically add it in the same place, but we can also add it in the URL. So if we take the table of content pane and we set that to hide, it will then display it closed. The default will be closed, but the user can open it, unlike what we just saw with the metadata pane. All right, so this will be the basic view, and the user can then open it and close it. In addition, we also have another parameter which can also be set back in the administration, and that is regarding the search box. So if we open up the table of contents, but we have, for example, a single file and there is no need to provide search functionality, and so then we can also set the search to be none. And that will then open up the table of contents pane, but without the search pane, without the search box. And so this is again something which is ongoing, allowing the configuration of the different elements on the screen, which will allow you can create different instances of the viewer, which you can then attach to different collections, depending on the profile of that collection. So beyond the IE viewer, we've also added, improved the viewer's usability, where the first aspect is related to the IE viewer, and that is the ability to navigate between files from the full screen modes. Up to now, you could navigate between files only when it's in a non-expanded mode, and now also once you open it to full view, you can scan between, you can navigate between the different files, and we'll show that in a second. And the universal viewer, this is a request that came through from the customers. Up to now, the universal viewer, when the download option only downloaded the image from the image server, which is rendered by the IIIF, which is always the lower resolution, but of course you want to have, in some cases, you want to have the high resolution image available for download. So that is an option which is now configurable. And in addition, the OpenCDragon, as I said before, this is a replacement, a more advanced replacement to the JPEG 2000 viewer, but we have added the functionality which aligns it with all the functionality which it was in the JPEG 2000, which mainly includes a rotate and print. We'll see what that looks like. So if we take this TIFF file, for example, you can see that we have, this is the new viewer. This is the OpenCDragon viewer, which was existing before, and we added to it the rotate right and left. And if we add here as a parameter, enable print equals true, then once you open the TIFF file, then you have also the print action, and this print action is also depends on the print XSL which you had previously, so you can also control the UX of the printing image. Now regarding the download option, so if we open this, we can open it with the universal viewer, and then you'll be able to see how the download option can provide two different download options. One is the lower resolution, one is a higher resolution. And currently the system is configured so that the universal viewer will open all IEs with entity type of picture. So we'll set that briefly on the same IE. We'll edit the general IE characteristics, set the entity type to picture, save that, commit the changes, and now once we view the object, it opens it with the universal viewer. And if we take a look, for example, at the TIFF file, then as you can see here on the bottom left, you can see there are two options. One is the whole image, which is the one which is rendered, which is lower resolution, and then we have the higher resolution one, which is, as you can see, a much larger file, and that is the original TIFF. And the last change which we've done around delivery is the AV viewer and the audio-visual viewer. Audio-video, sorry. And here, this is again, this came to replace the JW player, which has been removed due to the licensing changes which has been done there, which unfortunately we do not control. So we added this one, which is even better, and we are waiting to hear some feedback from you on this viewer. So it's really a easy to use, got all the basic functionality which you would need in an AV viewer, and as you can see over here, you can control the speed of the playback, open full view, and return. You have a start from a replay for the entire content. So it's a very easy to use player, and again, we'll be happy to hear your feedback on the usage. So user experience. User preferences, we have now added the user preferences, the ability to customize, also the TA workbench, the technical analyst workbench. And we're slowly covering all the different elements of the pages in Rosetta. And here you can customize all the different aspects of the table. We'll see briefly what that looks like. And if you go into the Workbench, we have many elements which, again, depend on the specific technical analyst who is working on that table, which elements more interest him or her, and they can be changed, and the changes will be saved cross-session. So, for example, there's a default paging, but one technical analyst might prefer to have 100 records and have a broader view of all the areas in the system. And the sorting, for example, if we could take the producer and change the columns, move the producer to be before the title if that's a specific information which is more interesting for one of the technical analysts, and the sorting can be changed. And all of this is saved cross-session. So if you log out and log back in, then all of those elements, as you can see, the sorting has been retained. The view of 50 records, the sorting is retained, and the same for the order of the columns. So around preservation, we have added, this is an idea that came through from the Format Library Working Group. We have added more information, the deployment history, first of all, of the different releases, with the dates of each one of the deployments, including manually installed releases, not only the official ones. And in addition, there was also infrastructural change where the Format Library installation is now on GitHub and not on the FTP server anymore. But this is something which doesn't concern the institution, as the configuration has been adjusted accordingly. So there have been some changes in the documentation. This is an ongoing effort that we're doing for updating the documentation, which is also screenshots and other aspects of the paths, and which I mentioned there, which need to be refreshed and updated every now and then. But it's also a more broader view of a change that we are doing, and mainly going to be doing in the second half of 2019 and 2020. Specifically, now we have. First of all, we refreshed the system administration guide. We updated the screenshots and the different references that are inside the documentation. In addition, we added, this is again, the list of documentation that you have for 6.1. You have the Solo Cloud configuration guide, and then the database dictionary, which is a request that came through from several customers who create reports, customized reports on the database. So this is an Excel which provides information and description of all the different views that we have and the columns of the views. And this is the first stage that we've released, and we still have some more information that a next version that will be coming out at some point. But this is certainly a good source of truth which you can work with if you are configuring your own reports. In addition, we also have a link to the database utilities, which you can see over here at the bottom, which provides information and guidelines on how to create backups and other utilities which are available through Ex Libris. So several important announcements which you can find also in the release notes. I think I've mentioned most of them. The JPEG 2000 viewer was removed and is automatically replaced by the OpenC Dragon viewer. But of course, if you have your own external viewers, then you can continue working with them. In addition, we're doing a cleanup for the METS files, and part of that, we removed the redundant metadata DNX section from the source metadata. We came out with an announcement before we did this, and we sat with some of the customers just to make sure that that no one is actually banking on this content, on this information. So this change should have no effect on the institutions. But you should be aware that every commit that is done from now on, since it's going to clear this up, then even if the commit doesn't have a real change, then it will still increment a version. This will be just once. And then customers with Solaris, which is only some of you, US sent guidelines. We have been in touch with these customers, and we are working with them on upgrading to on working with the reinstallation of Rosetta for Linux operating system. So we'll do just go a brief overview of the roadmap. 6.2 is going to come through at the end of this year in December 2019. There's going to be quite a lot of features around data management. We're adding the ability to delete a representation. So up to now, you could delete a file or delete an IE, and we are now, there were several use cases that came through from institutions about needing to delete representations, mainly around having sort of erroneous submission applications and similar sort of use cases. Of course, this is a sensitive area. Therefore, anything to do with deletion. This is a discussion we also had at RMIT at the working group meeting. Anything to do with deletion has been separated out to as a maintenance task, which requires specific roles, and then only goes to the recycle bin, which then requires another pair of eyes for deletion. In addition, there are CMS update enhancements, which we are working with the working groups for adding for better synchronization with the external system. Another change which came through for the interoperability through SRU, where we include suppressed IEs when the user is authenticated. Data inconsistency tools. So this is really part of the enhancement request that came through Reading 6.0. Around providing better consistency in the system between the database and the storage. And here we're going to be providing a tool which generates a report on the health of the system and highlights any inconsistencies that there are between the two. And that would be either orphan files in the storage which don't have a reference in the database, or a dead reference in the database which doesn't point at a specific file, or it's mislocated, mispositioned, and this should give you a good picture of if there are any discrepancies in your system. Bulk unassign, as I mentioned before, this is again in case there is a specific staff member who is out of office and is on leave for a long term. Then you can bulk unassign all the SIPs which are assigned to that specific technical analyst or assessor, and RIP ID cleanup, a RIP ID cleanup, which is another request which came through from the working groups. From the infrastructure, we are working on improving the SIP processing parallelization, which is a request that came through from a working group regarding improving the load balancing algorithm, and we are improving the algorithm to consider also the number of files that each SIP has and the size of the files, two aspects which have impact on the consumption of the SIP. And we are enqueuing the different SIPs accordingly. So we are going to do a gradual deployment of this, and we're going to work with specifically some of the institutions before it's going to be configurable. It's going to be optional for the institutions, but this should be a major improvement for all those who are having a very large throughput of content and want to improve the performance. In addition, we are having upgrades to Oracle 19 and other third parties like FlexPaper and ImageMagick, which is also around defects which have come through from those third parties and should be resolved in the latest and greatest. Preservation, we are providing the ability to export AIP to include all the versions, not only the latest, and we are currently working on the design for this with the working groups. Preservation planning, this is going to be a fast track. So basically it's going to be the ability to create a preservation planning which is not necessarily dependent on a risk which has been identified, but more of a predefined migration which the institution is interested in, but want to run it in the system to have all the events and all the original and migrated files all sitting in the system. In addition, we are adding the ability to manage the version increments for IE updates through APIs. So this means that institutions can define if they are performing a set of updates onto a singular IE. They can define that only the last one, the terminal change which is done on that IE, will then commit the changes, which basically means that there will be only one version increment on the IE for all the changes that have been done. So it's basically parallel to what we have today in the application, but also through APIs. So up to now, any change, any minor change which you did a single IE created another increment, so here you can control that. And then we have the repository task plugin for DNX values, where now we are expanding it beyond that to be able to update anything in the beyond the general characteristics, and now be able to update other DNX values. So around the user experience and delivery, there's a user preferences, which we are continuing to almost going to cover all the screens that we have in the system. We're adding support for streaming services for video, audio formats. So that's basically we're going to be creating a derivative copy of the original stream using the migration plugin to transcode to HLS using the FFmpeg tool. And the institutions will be able to configure the number of variant streams through the transformation profiles, which also affects the preprocessor of the viewer. So this is quite a major change, which should provide a better delivery experience of videos and audios. And then we are adding also a quick search in the management menu. So this is part of a series of features that we are adding for the usability of the system. And here you'll be able to just go in and quickly type the menu which you're looking for example, access rights, and just type it in, and the menu will then be opened. This is in addition to the favorites menu, which we've added, and several other features around that area. So this is a broad view of the roadmap, focus areas both in 6.2 and beyond. So beyond the preservation features, which we are always and constantly working on together with working groups, we're going to be initiating also improvements around the data management and the user experience, which you saw a lot of it today, and around delivery, which we are continuously trying to improve the experience. So around user experience, it's the principle here is really easy to use. We want to make the system as easy as possible to use, not only for those institutions who are just joining and using the system, but also for more experienced customers who work on creating material flows, etc. We want to reduce the need to turn to the documentation or to the support team. So the UX is going to be more workflow oriented. There's going to be training. There's already new training which is more focused on workflows and less specifically on building blocks in the system. So we're enriching also the out-of-the-box setup and cleaning up many of the workflows which have a lot of configurations which are not relevant for many of the customers. So we're really putting those aside as more advanced configurations and not necessarily for the default setup flow. Around the data management, we are looking into replacing basically the reporting mechanism with one which is more customizable. It will be much easier for you to customize and create your own reports without the need to really go directly into the database, but use the system itself for customizing your own reports. And a discussion which we started already at RMIT, and that's around the sharing, where we want to allow the institutions to share the system usage, which will allow us as a vendor to provide more proactive and better, more efficient support, and also as a sharing portal between the different institutions of understanding best practices. Of course, this will be compliant with GDPR and any other regulatory issues that you will have. And around the non-functional roadmap, we have continuous root cause analyses that we are running. We are updating the database and providing better previews of the features that we are going to deploy in order to have a deployment of features which reflects what the customers are actually looking for. And around deliveries, as I said, there's an audio and video stream which came through, but beyond that, we are looking at IIIF community, the version 3 of the API. We are working on the 3D deployment and rendering, which is coming through on IIIF, which is basically a replacement of IXIF. So there are several issues beyond those which we are discussing with the working groups. For example, as you can see at the bottom, the multiple format identification, the storage plugin. We have a major discussion now with the working groups about nested IEs, which is a huge change to the content structure in Rosetta, and we are having discussions on how and when this can be done. This is really changing the whole attitude to the relation between the IEs. This is something which, in any case, whichever direction we go, this is going to be in 2020. We're also looking into having a change into APIs usage to make them more usable and easier to develop above Rosetta. And other features you can see here around integrations with external systems, which we are going to be enhancing. So perhaps just a brief call out to any of you who are currently not part of one of the working groups. We strongly encourage you to join one of them, even just as a listener at the first stage, and at the second stage you can have a real impact. As you can see, many of the features which we saw today came through from the working groups, so we are strongly encouraging to join anyone you would like and interested, and it will help you even to learn at the first stage about the system and about best practices of other more experienced institutions. And the last slide about our involvement in the community. Then we are members of the OPF, the Open Preservation Foundation, where we took part also in the Jove Hack Week a couple of months ago. We are going to be participating at and sponsoring at the. We're going to be sponsors at the iPress in Amsterdam in September. PASIG, we participated this year in Mexico City, and DPC, we were members last year. We are going to reconsider again for next year. This year, we're currently freezing freezing the membership till we might renew it next year. But every year we continuously check for where the best where we would like to invest our resources, so we can be involved in the latest best practices in the preservation discipline. So that's that for today. Thank you very much for joining. And I'm sorry I did not leave enough time for questions. You can certainly ask something now if you have. In any case, I'll be available. Email, you can pick up a phone. As you know, there's been an issue with the listserv, which we are currently working on fixing. But you can certainly send me a personal email, and I will respond as soon as possible. So thank you very much for joining, everyone.